Hello and welcome to Startup Stories with Scaleway, where we explore cutting-edge startups around the world and how they leverage cloud computing technologies. I am your host, Ethan Pierce, and today's guest is Mayank Mathur, founder and CEO at Avasa AI, a real estate search platform providing an end-to-end home rental solution for discovery, visitation, and acquisition of a new property. Welcome, Mayank.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, and I enjoyed our pre-podcast chat to learn a little bit more about what you do and kind of the reasons around that and where you want to take this. But to give our audience some context on that idea, I'd love to have kind of your brief elevator pitch so we better understand just this concept of Avasa, and then we can go into all kinds of good questions about where that came from and what you're doing and where you're going.
Sure. So Avasa is designed to make home search super simple for busy professionals, whether they are moving from overseas into a new country or moving within the same country. On an average today, it takes about 23 days to find a property. It's very time consuming. It's very oftentimes expensive as well. And you have to put your life on a side. Instead of all of that, you can just work with Avasa, where for every search, we dedicate a personal concierge or a Sherpa, who is actually a very kind of tech-powered Sherpa, and we'll discuss all of that in detail. And the Sherpa can help you organize the whole search. So whether it's identifying which areas and which properties you want to live in, organizing the visitations, or going all the way till signing the lease and advising you on how to negotiate the best offer for you. So our Sherpa and our team is kind of constantly with you, working through our platform, working through all the kind of data products we have created over time. And the goal is to help you find that property in less than 10 hours of your time. And in doing so, we are obviously saving you a lot of time, but also providing you the industry insight and info that you can use to really negotiate the best offer for yourself and settle down very quickly.
The 10-hour thing is super interesting because I think if anybody's ever moved to a new city or especially a new country, 10 hours is nothing compared to how much time it can kind of take. Which is why then, the follow-up to then the brief idea of what you do is the backstory of what brought you to wanting or needing to build this solution. I'm always curious when entrepreneurs build things, what was the thing, the impetus that really took them to feeling they needed to solve that particular problem. And so I understand that was kind of you moving to London and encountering this problem. So maybe a little bit on the backstory.
Back in December 2015, my wife and we came back from India, where I had created another startup. And we ran into the home search problem. So we ended up meeting about 14 or 15 different estate agents, visited about 35 properties. Took us almost a month or almost 5 weeks actually, and spent roughly about 100 hours to find that property basically. And what we discovered in that is that during that process is that there's basically no one who's helping the tenant. They're on their own. They have to call all the estate agents. They have to run around. They're kind of in the hands of the estate agents basically to show them the properties and tell them what to do. And for us, that wasn't good enough anymore. Now we are in an environment where consumers are used to much better quality of service, whether it's shopping or restaurants or any number of other things. It's very easy to be done, easily done on a mobile app or on the websites, basically. But the real estate industry had not progressed, and that kind of triggered the idea about how do we improve this experience. So being an ex-investment banker myself, and my wife is a strategy consultant, we sat down and we looked at the industry map and said, okay, who's doing what exactly? And why is there this big a gap in the experience of people who are actually going to live in that property? Can we make it easier? And we figured out this thing that the economic incentives in the industry are geared to drive the best result for the landlord, not necessarily the best experience for the tenant. So the estate agents, they get a commission from the landlords on the basis of the amount of rent they have paid. The listing platforms, they get a listing fee from estate agents to send them leads. And those leads are me and you who are looking for a property to hunt, basically, property to live in. So we thought a lot. We interviewed, in that year, 2016, we interviewed over 100 tenants to really figure out how do they find this process. And everybody kept telling us that the system is broken, the process is broken. So we created a new one, and we implemented what I described earlier, a single point of contact that does everything for you. All you have to do is come into our environment and tell us, hey, help me.
No, I think that's super interesting. We talked a little bit before the recording about Paris, where you lived for a couple years, and where I live, and It's very complicated here as well. Whether it's the metrics of how you need to um, be interesting enough to a landlord so that they pick your particular application out of all the other ones, or what those might be, but also just the simple fact that unlike the U.S. with the MLS service, where basically all properties go into a central database, so one single realtor can help you find anything and everything. In France, that's actually not the case. So if you're looking for something and you really want to be thorough, you might need to go see 4, 5, 6, 10 realtors because they were all going to have their unique inventories. And that is not only problematic in terms of just the time, but it's also just frustrating because people are working for you. Some of these realtors can be extremely efficient and good at their jobs, and yet in the end they don't get anything because you went with someone else just because of the inventory. I find that to be really interesting. So that takes us into your Sherpa service idea then, because I think you brought it up before, but to explain a little bit more, whether I'm a corporate relocating employees or I am personally moving to a new city and need help, let's talk about the Sherpa service.
Sure. So the Sherpa is your single point of contact. We start with a very simple onboarding call where your Sherpa, after you have filled out some information in our app, the Sherpa looks at that, asks you additional questions, throws some kind of alternatives at you, just to kind of understand what are the kind of key triggers for you that will help you decide a specific property or a specific area. From that point on, the Sherpa is supervising every part of the journey. So, and that's where some of our technology kicks in as well. So our artificial intelligence-driven recommendation engine kicks in to start giving you recommendations on every single day. And the Sherpa observes them, Sherpa monitors them to be sure that it's the right kind of properties that you had asked for. And we can change on the flies. And if you come back to us immediately saying, "Hey, I'm not actually getting the right kind of options," we can expand the search. We can look at different areas. We can come back to do a phone call with you. So every single one of our clients, they get access to our Sherpa twice a week for at least 30 minutes, as well as the constant kind of chatter going on the chat function that we have. So they are really with you. They are really understanding what is it that you are looking after. And oftentimes we have heard this feedback from our clients that it seemed like my Sherpa was thinking more about my search than I was, which is exactly what we wanted to do. So obviously, I mean, there's a human element to it, but that human element is powered by very strong technology in the background, which tenants don't really care about. All they need is that a specific service. They want to understand that there's somebody in the industry who is looking after their interest, who understand what is it that they need. So once you have identified which properties you like to visit, we can actually send people inside a property with a video phone, and they can show you a live telecast of the property. And this person is working for you as a tenant. So you may be in the US, or you may be in Singapore, or you may be in the next town, or you may be busy at work and you can't leave your flat in London and go and check out the property next door even. So we can send someone, that person fires up a video call, and you can give them instructions. They're already trained to identify what are the kind of, pluses and minuses in the property. So it's not just saying, "Hey, this is all amazing," and kind of hiding the bad things. But they instructed to find out, "Hey, how's the water pressure? Is there mold on the wall? Is there kind of, what is the other issue? What's the noise like in the living room?" So they check for all of those things. And as soon as you like one of those properties that you have viewed, you can make an offer through the app. You can come back to us, ask for more inputs in terms of how do we, and we already provide information, but if you need additional support on negotiations, etc., we jump again on the call to understand that unique situation. We craft an offer. By that time, we have already helped you create your portfolio. I think in France, you can call it the dossier. So, you have everything ready for the moment you like a property, boom, it goes to the other side, and you're kind of far ahead of your competition in a sense, in terms of making an offer, in terms of presenting a case, which is very well built out. And really, then we continue pushing the other side, whether it's the landlord or the estate agent, we continue talking to them as well to be sure they really understand who our client is, who our tenant is, what's their profile, what are their kind of, why do they like the property, to create that little bit of familiarity in the minds of the landlords and estate agent for our tenants. So we have never had or maybe just one odd somewhere where our offer was rejected. But invariably, all of our clients have made two offers before they have finalized a property, because they can identify and find a property so quickly and say, "Hey, I have another 6 weeks to wait before I have to move in. Let me negotiate one more property. So, let's go harder." So yeah, it's really your friend. The Sherpa is really your friend in the transaction, and they will go all the way till making sure you have the right terms in the lease, and you have the keys in your hand on the day of your moving, basically.
As an American moving to Europe, and I would think for a lot of American executives who have an offer to come work for a company in London or Paris or wherever, and whether they've traveled or not, if they haven't gone through some of this process, they might not realize how complicated it can be. Like I mentioned, the MLS thing, where not no single realtor in Paris has access to all the apartments that are available. There may be some sharing of that through their networks, but there's definitely the way the commission structures work. They're actually very, very protective about the inventory that they have. But also more than that, simple things like these can be, especially depending on the size of apartment and the location of it, these can be extremely competitive to get into, where you can, if you don't know either, if you don't have experience making sure you're doing it the right way, or your realtor's not helping you, or just because of the nature of the market, you can apply for 10 apartments before you get one. And that's problematic, time consuming, and very frustrating. And then you also have simple things like, even if you look really good on paper, the trust factor of in France, especially for realtors who are, not for realtors, but for landlords who are in some ways afraid of their tenants, because the law is so on the side of the tenant in France that people not paying their rent once they've moved in or causing other problems are a great fear for landlords. So they tend to be very, very picky about the dossier, about the applications that they go through. And sometimes, especially when you have something like most of your money is made out of the country because you're just moving into that country recently, or in the next month or two, that can completely block you from getting access to an awful lot of what's available. Pushes you into kind of an executive selection of apartments, which have a premium attached to them because of they're accepting that risk. So to kind of maybe address that point a little more specifically, we talk about some of the different services that you've talked about with the Sherpa service and them going in with the video phone and all the different ways they're helping you. And we see that as kind of a personal service, but the reality, that's also very much a corporate service that you offer for employee relocation.
That is right. So we have, in terms of our client base, about 70 to 80% would be kind of individuals who are coming to us, and remaining 10-20% are kind of people who are coming to us through corporates. That corporate side of the business is very new for us. We haven't yet kind of really started focusing on that. But what we see is invariably corporates benefit substantially more from our offer, because what they offer their expats, or even kind of their new employees who are coming in for year even, or hopping from one job to the, or one division to the other, they may need to move from one city to the other as well, and it's very difficult for this employee to go to a new location and then find a property to live. Oftentimes, corporates will give their employees 2 to 4 weeks of private accommodations, whether it's a hotel or Airbnb or any number of other private solutions. And then the onus is on the employee to go on and do the home search by themselves, basically. So they're still spending the time. They're still not productive at the job. They're still kind of, completely distracted during daytime, answering phone calls and emails, and maybe going for the viewings and all of that. So the cost to the corporate itself is very, very high as well. And as compared to that, for almost all of our expat clients, we were able to find them a property ready to move in on the day of their arrival in the country. And that's because we start about 6 to 8 weeks prior to really understand what is it they need. And we can do those remote viewings. We can, advise them. We can take them through the process even before they have landed. Now, it works for most of the clients. In some cases, clients come back and say, listen, I really, like we're working with an American family right now to find a place for their daughter who's going to a university in England. And the parents are saying, no, I really want to be there to see the locality and the property before we finalize. So like, fine, you come here, you stay for a week, and then we have finalized everything. But really, the focus continues to be on the point, and I want to touch on something that you had mentioned in your talk just now. So the supply is crucial. And the way we are set up is, and maybe it's a good time to just touch on the tech layer for a moment.
That's
so
fantastic.
So we pull properties from a lot of different sources in an attempt to cover all the properties on our platform, right? So we don't have our own supply, as in we are not trying to sell you those 50 properties that are in our basket. We look at 100% of the supply across the country, basically. right? And then it's for our team to reach out to that specific landlord or estate agent who's marketing that, to be sure that we can get all the right additional information if there's something missing, or kind of organize the process very quickly and efficiently. So the tenants don't lose out, whether they are looking at city A versus city 2, or area A or area 2 within the same city. They look at the whole inventory basically. We layer on top additional information like, hey, how long is the commute to my office? Is it just 45 minutes? How far is my kids' school? Or even flip it around and say, okay, I don't want a property that's more than 30 minutes cycling distance to my office at in Paris First District, for example, or combine that with no more than 15 minutes walking to my school, my kids' school, which is at this specific location. So how quickly can you find those properties, identify those? So layer information from a lot of different kind of sources outside of our environment, and run algorithms very quickly to understand which areas and which property are the best match for them, basically. Right. So that in itself is probably hours and hours of work of time saved for tenants, especially when they don't know the city, right? So otherwise, the option is to look at an ad and then go on Google and look at 3 or 4 different kind of searches to understand where exactly is this property. Does it work for all the family members or all the people who are going to live in the property?
When we first moved to Paris from the south, because of the fact that we didn't know, you can easily find out where the neighborhoods are that people recommend or different things, but you don't have the experience of kind of knowing what that is, because of there's no data that really you can have access to that helps with that you're providing there. So our manual solution was we spent a month staying in a different Airbnb every week. And we changed arrondissement. We changed quarters each week, and after a month, we're like, okay, this is the place that now we know where we really like. We know where we go to, so we understand the metro a little bit more. We understand, we have the experience piece of this a little bit more clear, so that we were able to make a choice based on, maybe we like this neighborhood better, but it turns out it's not as convenient or as just enjoyable on a daily life compared to a neighborhood we didn't like as much, but just things are easier or whatever that might be. So that's super important to be able to provide that data layer from all these different sources. Something as simple as saying, well, this is where I know I'm going to work because here's the office. I need to see neighborhoods that have these kind of schools for my kids and these kind of services I want, but I need to understand my commute options. Like that kind of a value add that you're providing is really important, because unless you have already lived in a city before, or you've traveled there enough, or you do our Airbnb experiential study, you aren't going to know that, and you're going to end up getting to a place that you might not appreciate in the same way.
Absolutely. And that data exists today online, but in a lot of different baskets. You have to know which website. So whether it's crime data looking at, coming from the local police, or even pollution data coming from government agencies, to, what's the kind of neighborhood like, which is again kind of generally covered in different areas, what kind of shops, etc., exist out there. Or, of course, some of the information you can just go to do a Google search and find that. But it's the ability to look at everything holistically and say, okay, this is my lifestyle requirement. I want to be in a nice area. I want to be in a quiet residential area which has good quality schools, and it's no more than 45 minutes to my office and no more than 30 minutes to my partner's office. And oh, by the way, I take public transport and they commute bicycle, right? So everybody's requirements have to match up for people to take the decision about that property. When we did our initial interviews back in 2016-17, and as we were researching the whole idea and building the initial prototypes, people kept telling us that commute time is one of the top 2 requirements for a property. Second one oftentimes was exactly what you pointed out: how do I feel in that property? And you extended that to say, how do I feel in that neighborhood, right? So second part is something that you can only achieve with a little bit of subjective feedback, right? So and that basically means something that we have on our roadmap to build more communities, whether it's city-wise or whether it's country-wise. We're kind of working on a few things. We have some small communities on Facebook already today which are campus focused. So one MBA school or other university a lot of their students are part of those communities and exchanging ideas and kind of telling each other about what is it to live in the specific areas and answering each other's questions, etc. So it's just the ability to go into a group which is kind of an affiliated kind of environment. So they all are part of the same university campus, so more or less similar kind of requirements. You can ask questions and you can get the subjective information from them, combine it with the objective data that we collect, and then the layer on top with the which the Sherpa provides as well. So between all of these things, we believe that our clients have enough information to make a decision quickly. And behind the scenes, what's constantly working is the lists, the messages, the templates, so that you have everything ready to be pushed out with a click of a button the moment you are ready for property. So you never lose out in that competitive situation, basically.
And I think with all of those different details that you've shared, we already kind of have a pretty good idea of why you're probably better or at least distinguished from your competition. But I would, as a way to address it directly, why should companies choose Avasa or individuals choose Avasa? What I guess the idea for me here is we've heard all of that. So now, if I'm listening to this and I haven't really clicked that I need to call you, from your perspective, what kind of companies should reach out to you?
Sure. So I think the most important point to note in this whole thing is that we are pretty much the only one who are focused on the tenant's interests. Everybody else in the chain, whether it's an estate agent or any kind of other service providers, they have an incentive to send you into the most expensive property so that they get the highest commission from the landlord.
Yeah.
Right? We switch it around and we say, okay, how do we save you time, money, and cost and kind of efforts, basically, all of it. So we are really focused on safeguarding your interests in that transaction. The second thing is the support that we provide, which is again kind of very unique in the industry. You have worked in large corporates as well in the past, so like relocation agencies and relocation support for senior executives was a big thing back in the days when everybody would move around. Hopefully, it comes back soon. But that kind of support is never available to, let's say, entry-level employees or mid-tier employees, basically, who are moving between cities, between countries, or even within the same city. So they all are wasting their time by themselves. So the way we have structured our support is it actually works for every layer of the employee base. So whether you're hiring fresh graduates coming to the who are being kicked out of university residence halls, and then they need a place to live, in a week's time, and these are real cases, by the way, where we have jumped in and helped. Or you have just made a new hire coming from overseas and they need support so they can be operational on their work on day one. So all of that support is really kind of available only at our doorstep. Everything else that we have seen so far was either kind of very manual, old school legacy kind of a style of a relocation service, or just a simple online platform where you see 5 or 10 or 20 different options and you're meant to just book without actually going inside the property or without actually doing that kind of subjective due diligence check, basically. That may work for some clients, but practically everybody who comes to us, they have more detailed requirements than just kind of looking, and it's not a holiday rental like Airbnb, right? So you're going to live there for a year or more. So you need to know much more than about the property than what's published on the website and just a nice little marketing video, basically. So we provide that depth of data and that width of kind of experience to enable these tenants to make the decision very quickly, and that is kind of something which does not exist in the industry at all.
And so obviously to do all of these things, to have on the AI side, have all these APIs reaching, have all these algorithms reaching out into APIs of all these other data sources to be able to pull all this together and to automate so much of this process, that takes us into the heart of a lot of our discussion here, which would then be cloud computing infrastructure. So obviously a company like yours is going to need lots of different components in varying degrees over time, depending on what you're doing and what kind of not only the inbound requests, but at different points in time you're needing to get data from different places in different amounts, and so all of that becomes very complex when you're having to manage your own infrastructure, especially if you have peaks in activity because you've gotten in the press or you've had a big interview or a big partnership or whatever. So between just even creating something this complex, but then also being able to scale it up as you get these inbound peaks of interest and things like that. Let's talk then a little bit about what goes into your cloud computing resources, what you needed in terms of infrastructure, and then specifically this idea of the partnership with, obviously this is Startup Stories with Scaleway. So talking a bit about the startup program and why that was interesting to you and how that helps with your infrastructure needs.
Sure. So just a quick word on the tech stack that we have, and that kind of leads into the infrastructure. So at the core, there's a lot of data that's being pulled from different APIs and kind of, stitched together in a nice little kind of digital experience for the tenants. On top of that layer, we have various layers of, I will just use the broad term of artificial intelligence. So whether it's a neural network driven recommendation engine or an NLP chatbot, which is kind of a group chat environment and has our NLP bot active in there along with the Sherpa. So there's a lot of information that's being collected and being analyzed in real time. And then the third layer, which will come in the future, is the machine learning algorithm, which analyzes the leads quickly. So today we review the leads manually, but we have designed that, and that is something that will kind of come up in the next few months, basically. So there are various layers of that intelligence that we have already added. And in the future, there are even kind of bigger plans in terms of what do we do with all the data and all the analytics that is being generated right now. So this industry is notorious, unfortunately, in terms of being basically the same as it was probably 200 years ago. Not much has changed. And we strongly believe part of that reason, or a strong part of that reason, is that there's just not enough data to understand the user journey. Everybody has an idea, but there's no real data, especially not in real time. So what happened in the market, that data is available historical basis last month, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, but in the real time, what are the users going through? Are they finding the right properties? Are they finding the kind of, the right opportunities for them or not? Or they are kind of having to move around from one area to the other, one city to the other for specific reasons. All of that is being tracked in our app today. And we believe at a scale, this data adds huge amount of value to the industry in general, as well as to our own user base, basically. So how does that all tie into infrastructure is basically where we are is very, very early on in our journey. So what we need is really some environment which is kind of flexible and provides that really, and that's kind of also linking into Scaleway, really that, support for these startups basically to come in, be within a community and work with Scaleway experts to design something that's flexible enough that we can keep building over time. We are not starting from a fixed kind of infrastructure. We have a little bit, obviously, which we have built in the past and tested our kind of initial hypothesis on and initial kind of users and clients. And we have about 50,000 users now on the app, but we are going into millions of users in the next couple of years, basically. So that's a massive scale up. And while building a lot of these pieces that I talked about a moment ago. So that effectively means a lot of moving pieces. And for our team to also kind of grow very quickly along with that kind of growth in the business, or even ahead of the growth of the business, basically. So when we came across Scaleway, that's the part we really like, that, there seems to be a lot of enthusiasm in the team. There's a lot of kind of, support, and even like this podcast, a lot of things that have been designed to help startups, basically, and go on that journey with these startups, rather than expecting that you come into us and this is a fixed environment and now you work because it's that's what we can do, basically. And we are really enjoying it. We have my tech team, they have already had their discussions with the Scaleway team, and we're kind of experimenting with a few things already right now. And very soon we'll go live. We actually haven't gone live yet, so I'm hoping in the next week or two we'll be live on the platform. But really kind of everybody is super excited to come in here and work with the team to really create. And that's how we see it. It's a partner. We may not, and team is very young as well, so we may not know every single thing. How does things scale? How do things scale at, when we have to service, I don't know, million users next year? How would that work out, basically? And within a Scaleway team, I think we have that support now to come in and ask those questions and really work with the architects there and other people to design that step by step, basically.
Well, it's super exciting and ties in well to my last question, which is, what's next? What's in the pipeline? So it sounds like a couple weeks away from rolling out your new infrastructure that you've been working on, and then also just maybe in that pipeline idea, the markets idea, because we didn't talk exactly about where your service is at and the markets you're currently operating in, but also your plans. If you go from 50,000 to a million, then that obviously probably means other markets to be going into. So what's next?
So we are currently live across the UK. We started in London 3 years ago. That's when a little over 3 years ago when we launched the basic version of the app, and then we expanded to Southeast, and now we are across the country. We are for this year we are gonna refocus on our kind of UK efforts because last 12 months have been unfortunately very quiet given the situation. So we are really focusing on how do we help professionals coming from overseas and also international students coming into the UK. We've tied up a lot of partnerships that has kind of started giving us very very good results. So really scale that up and nail down that model and the tech, basically tech stack fully. While we in last 3 months, while we were building our commercial kind of activity, we started getting a lot of inbounds from people who are based in other countries in Western Europe. So whether it's France or Germany, or whether it's kind of northern US or a couple of Asian countries as well. And we are constantly getting these queries from our partners saying, hey, can you help my clients in those markets as well? Because the problems are, let's say, universal. Everybody faces the same issue, and there's absolutely no support that's provided, basically. So we haven't yet prioritized in terms of internationalization for next year, but that's definitely a firm plan for 2022, and probably we'll start with kind of something that's in proximity. So maybe it's France and Germany and one or two other European countries before we start kind of taking shape in other countries as well. But at the core, the idea is that home search is very difficult. And in the future, more and more people are going to be renting for probably longer period of time. Even if they move away from bigger cities into smaller cities, the challenges are always going to be the same because there's just not enough supply of good quality housing, basically. So we can come in and we can be that international brand that people and corporates instinctively trust to say, okay, yeah, well, our employees found a good property with Avasa when they moved to this country. Let's sign up with them when they're going to the next country as well. Not a problem.
Well, like we talked about before, the for me in France with the French Tech Startup Employee Visa, which is a real strength of this ecosystem, has created a ton of inbound profiles of allowing early stage startups to really hire best in class employees from anywhere in the world. And so it's not just the corporates that are potentially doing that; it's even small structures now. And as we reopen the economy and people are able to move about a bit more, I think we're going to see a lot of that still happen. Remote work is going to stay a thing, but I do believe that we're going to still see an awful lot of business relocation because it's still really important to, especially to early teams or to new teams that need to kind of build stuff together. So I look forward. I know France could use definitely a solution like this to really make the process smarter. I don't know that, making it easier would be great, but I think the problem is just we need to make it smarter because the system we have is basically a more or less dumb databases that are also siloed. So not only just this idea where we don't have all the data easy across all the different realtors, but just the simple fact that it's not a lot of data beyond just, how many rooms and what the price is. So this idea of really a much more intelligent and smarter system to allow people to find exactly the right property that matches their needs. I find that to be super interesting. So thank you so much for this discussion, Mayank. It's been really interesting. I've learned a ton, as always with these podcasts, and I look forward to hearing good news. I wish you all the best in scaling up Avasa.
Excellent. Thank you very much and appreciate all the questions. Thanks.
Thanks for your time. And thank you for joining us for this episode of Startup Stories with Scaleway. If you are a startup that uses cloud computing resources, be sure to check out Scaleway's startup program at scaleway.com. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or your preferred podcast platform, and check out all of the previous episodes of the podcast. Again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.